Flamethrower, World War II. The human desire to turn fire into an instrument of destruction dates back thousands of years. In the modern era, the idea has taken its most horrific form in the form of flamethrowers. They were widely used by American, Japanese, and German troops in the Second World War. Propelled by pressurized gas, they turned a distance of 15 to 35 meters into an inferno. The inferno-like heat of the flames reached 800 to 1200 degrees Celsius, melting human flesh and bone in an instant. The flamethrower operators, walking bombs with 2 or 3 fuel tanks on their backs, were the enemy's first and most hated targets. When the fuel tanks were hit, the operator would die a horrible death in his own inferno. Introduced in 1935, these flamethrowers were so deadly that their use was largely banned by international treaties after the war. At some point, humanity said,
"This is too much!"
The flamethrowers were the product of a period when man tested his own limits. If you had the chance to use these flamethrowers, which are deadly not only to enemy troops but also to their operators, would you really take them on your back and go out on the battlefield? M1 Garand, the sound of the Second World War. This deadly semi-automatic rifle became the standard of the American Army and was dubbed the weapon that won the war. General George S. Patton called it the finest weapon of war ever made. The 1936 semi-automatic work of art took shape at John Garand's Springfield Armory. It had an overwhelming fire superiority over rifles with cumbersome bolt-action mechanisms, such as the German Kar 98K, the Japanese Arisaka, that required manually feeding the next round after each shot. So it was fast, it was powerful, and it was reliable. American troops always started one step ahead of the enemy. This weapon expanded the limits of individual military power. Each trigger pull fired not just a bullet, but a moment that potentially changed the course of history. The M1 Garand fired 8.3006 Springfield caliber rounds from the top of the barrel with a metal magazine clip called N-block, with the patience of a hunter. Especially the characteristic metallic ping sound of the magazine as it popped out with the empty casing after the last bullet was engraved in the memory of a generation. Even today, when this iconic sound is heard in war movies and video games, it creates an instant association for those who know it. It is still a great favorite of collectors and history buffs. As a video game lover, I know and love this sound very well. If you are too, give it a like and choose your side. Katyusha. Imagine a sound. It tears the sky, penetrates your lungs. The vibration that follows shakes the ground. Your ears ring. That moment, every soldier at the front knows.
"Katyusha is coming!"
Made in 1941, this deadly weapon is a steel horror that the Soviet Union left behind in World War II. Officially called the BM-13, unofficially called Stalin's Army. The Katyusha was mounted on a simple truck chassis. It was powered by multiple rocket launchers mounted on it. But it was so effective that a salvo of a few seconds could turn an area hundreds of meters wide into an inferno in seconds. Just a roar, a scream, and then everything falls to the ground. The German soldiers called it Stalinorgel for a reason. This weapon, humming like an organ, but with a deadly melody, not a heavenly one, haunted the battlefield like a ghost, shattering morale. Interestingly, the Katyusha's most impressive feature was not its accuracy. On the contrary, its irregularity, its unpredictability, made it all the more terrifying. The Katyusha, today considered the ancestor of modern multi-barrel rocket systems, is engraved in history not only as a lethal weapon of an era, but also as a name of fear. What would you do if you heard that howl? Would you take cover? Or would you freeze? MG-42. The weapon that makes soldiers' blood run cold when they hear its sound. The 42, in its name, comes from the fact that it was produced in 1942, with a rate of fire of up to 1,500 rounds per minute. This machine gun developed by the Germans was not only capable of spraying bullets, but also terror. Allied soldiers gave this deadly rifle a nickname, Hitler's buzzsaw, Hitler's chainsaw, because the sound it emitted was like a mechanical death song. The bullets pierced the air so fast that what you heard was not individual explosions, but a hum. The war is over, but MG-42 is not. It left such a legacy that even today many countries use its basic design. Modernized versions like the MG3 are still in active service. And perhaps that is why the MG42 is not just a machine gun. It is one of the most iconic products of industrial warfare, cold-blooded engineering, and mechanized death. A K-47. In fact, only 3 words are enough to describe it. But first you need to know the following. This rifle, designed by Soviet engineer Mikhail Kalashnikov in 1947, was not just a weapon. It was a symbol. The protagonist of the 20th century's revolutions, revolts, and civil wars was the AK-47. It was so easy to use that anyone could fire it. Military experts unhesitatingly put this weapon at the top of the list of inventions that changed the world. So how did this deadly weapon with a 7.62 by 39mm bullet spread all over the world? Because it was easy to produce and low cost. Because it worked even when dropped in the mud. Cold, heat, sand, water, it doesn't matter. And war is not always fought with organized armies. That's why the AK-47 became a favorite of rebel groups as well as official armies. It has even found its way onto the flags of some countries, even on the logo of some YouTube channels like ours. Let me give you an idea about the prevalence of the AK-47. There are more than 100 million AK-47s in circulation in the world today. Yes, you heard that right. 100 million. I wish Kalashnikov, its creator, would whisper at the end of his life, "I had invented a lawnmower." He would whisper, regretting that his invention had spread so uncontrollably and turned into a scythe of death, especially in the hands of terrorists. But the AK-47's reputation was indelibly etched in the darkest pages of world history, whether it was blessed as the people's rifle or referred to as a curse. I mentioned that 3 words would suffice to describe this deadly rifle. Simple, durable, deadly. And if you had it, what would you use it for? V2 rocket, Hitler's last hope. Developed by Nazi Germany, the V2, or Vergeltungswaffe 2, was the first long-range ballistic missile in history. The genius of Wernher von Braun and the blood and sweat of many concentration camp prisoners in the secret bunkers of Peenemünde. This machine of death was a technological leap, as much as it was a monument to a crime that trampled on human dignity. In service between 1944 and 1952, the V2 carried the 1-ton Inferno 320 kilometers into the eerie confines of the atmosphere, climbing to an altitude of almost 90 kilometers, and then plunged into its target in deadly silence at 5 times the speed of sound. More than 1,300 people were killed by these missiles. But more importantly, this weapon ushered humanity into the space age. How? The V2's engineers were snapped up by the US and the Soviets after the war. Names like Wernher von Braun later became the cornerstones of NASA. So, a weapon that both destroyed and helped us reach the stars. Isn't that strange? That's another paradox of war. Technology designed for death can one day be used for exploration and peace. VX nerve agent. You don't see, you don't hear it, but it's there. VX is the deadliest form of chemical warfare. A tiny drop, just 10 milligrams, on the tip of a needle against your skin is enough to steal your life in minutes. If you inhale it, the end comes even faster. Born of British genius in the 1950s and nurtured in American hands, this deadly weapon pushed the limits of the concept of mass destruction. It can penetrate even human skin and access the nervous system. This gas has become the protagonist not only in battlefields, but also in international intrigues and political murders. Although its production and existence was condemned on paper by the Chemical Weapons Convention in 1993, the 2017 murder of Kim Jong-nam, the eldest son of former North Korean leader Kim Jong-il, with VX in Malaysia, proved how active a threat it still remains. It has become the nightmare of secret services, dictators, and regime opponents. VX is such a persistent poison that it lurks for days and weeks on the surfaces it touches, especially in frosty and damp nooks and crannies. It keeps the risk of contact alive like a ghost and is almost impossible to clean. So why did humanity invent such a diabolical invention? The answer? Deterrence. To be able to say to the enemy, even without a threat as great as nuclear weapons, If you come near my borders, you will perish silently and painfully. The existence of this weapon has led to debates about the ethical limits of war. What is the resonance in our soul of killing without looking into the eyes of the enemy, without hearing his last breath? Does wiping a target off the map without seeing it give us victory? Or does it rob us of a part of our humanity? What are your views on these debates? Tsar Bomb. When, on October 30th, 1961, the Soviet Union test-fired RDS-220, the Tsar Bomb, into the calm whiteness of the Arctic, Novaya Zemlya, the world realized not only the pinnacle of power, but also its limits. This 27-ton monster was the most powerful explosive ever created by mankind. With 50 megatons of explosive power, this deadly weapon was 3,300 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The mushroom cloud after the explosion rose up to 60 kilometers high. The shockwave traveled through the atmosphere 3 times. This was not just a test. It was a strong message sent by the Soviet leadership to its enemies and to its own people during the Cold War. In fact, this lethal weapon was designed not to reduce cities to ruins, but to imprint in the minds of the people the understanding, don't underestimate us. But there was a paradox. It was so massive that it was too cumbersome to be of practical use on the battlefield. Even the specially armored Tupolev Tu-95V bomber carrying it struggled to hover, miraculously avoiding the explosion after dropping this deadly weapon on its target. This opened a new chapter in modern warfare strategies. The era of weapons made for show, but not for real combat. Yes, I hear you ask. How can a gigantic lethal weapon be made just to scare? The answer lies in the Tsar Bomb. Could it be that such weapons exist to prevent war, not to start it? Some say the Tsar Bomb was madness, others say it was a ghost keeping the peace. But which do you think it was? If you had the chance to use all these deadly weapons of World War II, and even if you were in the war at the time, which one would you use?